Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Nation's Pastime in the Nation's Capital. I'm your host, Andrew Snaith, here with my co-host, James Higgins, and we have an exciting show planned for you this week discussing very hot topics in Major League Baseball regarding the new guidance on foreign substances, some very hot players, some not-so-hot teams, and all kinds of stuff from around the league. But before we get started, thank you so much for listening to tonight's episode. A reminder, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at NatPastimeCap. We've been teasing the past couple weeks that you'd be able to send in voicemail or questions for these podcast-based shows for us to talk about on the shows. And while we do not have a way for an actual number to be called, we are opening up our DMs and have email available that you can go ahead and send us your questions either in written or voice format. Or if you know one of the hosts personally, go ahead and reach out to them as well. Anything that will get us the question works, and we will read it live on the show. That email, if you want to go ahead and send it through email, is natpastimecap@gmail.com. And our Twitter at natpastimecap, which you should already know. You can just send us a DM on there as well. And James, I think it'll be a good way to get some of the viewers to participate in these podcast-based shows a little bit more since they can't call in.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with all the stuff that's come down this week with Major League Baseball and the quote unquote sticky stuff, Rob Manfred and the rest of the league really laying down the hammer on something that's been going on in the game for quite a while.
Yeah, Manfred did come out earlier this week and said that he determined, quote, that new enforcement of foreign substances was needed to level the playing field. And he must believe that it was very necessary because he did not just ban a few substances. It was a flat ban for literally anything considered, quote, sticky. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, drawing the line with spider tack and even excessive use of pine tar is one thing, but drawing a hard line with everything, rosin and sunscreen should not be illegal. Every single pitcher from single A, even elite college programs to the major leagues uses sunscreen and rosin, and that's not for a spin rate thing. That's not for making the ball move like wiffle ball. That's for having control and getting a grip on the baseball, because these baseballs are so hard to grip. And if you ask most hitters in Major League Baseball, they don't mind the sunscreen and rosin at all, because they want these guys who throw harder than they've ever thrown to have control of the baseball and know that it's not every two pitches.
Yeah, and that is an excellent point indeed. I know a lot of people have brought that up, the issue of control with the amount of injuries that have happened this year from these players throwing as hard as they can with seemingly no idea where it's going. And now you take away one of the only things that could potentially give them some control over the baseball. And that's definitely one of the more interesting angles that's been explored from the whole sticky substance ban. Is there any other in particular on either side that you think is especially noteworthy, James?
I think with the hitters, I think, you talk about what Nick Castellanos has brought up. He's one of the Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, JD Martinez. Those have been some of the guys who have said. Josh Donaldson, obviously the biggest player in all this. They've really brought up how the sticky stuff, especially spider tack, is really like a performance enhancing drug for pitchers, because it makes them move the ball like they've never seen before, and it makes it move like a wiffle ball. The spin and that the breaking balls have, the movement that even some of these fastballs have. And I think that a lot of these hitters are excited to eliminate spider tack and even an excessive amount of pine tar from the game, just to even the playing field, because they feel as if it's unfair. The ball is moving like it's never moved before, and there's really nothing for them to combat pitchers using spider tack. It would be one thing if there was something that hitters could do to combat that, and then it would be kind of an even playing field on both sides. But obviously, for the past couple of years, there's been nothing that hitters can do to combat spider tack. Some guys have come out of nowhere and just gotten really electric stuff out of the bullpen or in the rotation. It's like, where did these guys come from? Well, I guess we're starting to figure out now that, the use of spider tack in the game is really widespread. It's not just the Bauers and the Coles that you hear about. Your favorite pitcher besides Jacob deGrom is probably using something. And if it's spider tack or an excessive amount of pine tar, we will probably see them come down a little bit in terms of their performance. I guess reverse back to the mean, go back to what they've been their whole career, because this stuff is an advantage. I'm not saying it's the biggest issue in the game. Obviously everyone loves that nasty stuff that pitching ninja posts and all these strikeouts, that these ridiculous numbers that these pitchers are piling up. But I think it will definitely even the playing field for hitters. And we can see over these first couple of weeks that the league average has almost raised about 8 points since MLB said they would be coming down hard on pitchers with a 10-game suspension if they were to be caught using any sticky stuff.
Yeah, the 10-game suspension is is going to happen there if you do get caught doing it. Do you think yes or no? Is that too harsh?
I think the part that's too harsh is not being able to replace the guy on the roster, but also Major League Baseball wants to make an example out of whoever they catch. And especially if it's a reliever, that's going to be much tougher on a team than a starter. If it's a starter, you can navigate one, maybe two turns through the rotation, depending on where he is. You can navigate one or two turns. It'll be two turns at the most, and you can get through it. But not being able to replace a reliever 10 days on the roster, especially if you're going through a stretch where you don't really have any off days or your bullpen's just wearing thin, that's a bullpen arm that you're going to be short, and you're going to rely on your rotation to have to go deeper into games over those next 10 games because of that short bullpen arm that you can't replace. It's going to be harder to funnel guys in and out of AAA, just to try to get a fresh arm up there because of the fact that you can't replace him. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I think that a reliever being suspended will have the most impact on a team if it were to happen.
Next question then. Do you think, given the amount of use that has apparently happened this year, are we gonna see a suspension this year, or do you think this is gonna actually scare them straight?
I think it'll scare them straight, but I think at some point they're going to want to make an example out of something because one point that Trevor Bauer made, obviously he's been very outspoken about all this stuff since going back to 2018 when he was telling Major League Baseball that every pitcher was using this and that it should be outlawed. MLB did nothing. So he decided to use this stuff, and he's been one of the main guys who's been using this stuff since then. And I think Major League Baseball has kind of wanted to make an example out of him. There have been broadcasts on MLB Network where they've noted how his spin rate has gone down over a certain stretch, but then other starting pitchers whose spin rate has gone down the same amount or even more, they haven't even dared to mention it at all. So I think partly they want to make an example out of Bauer for whatever reason. I'm not sure. Trevor Bauer is usually right about all these things because he's not afraid to speak his mind. But I think at a certain point, what I was going back to saying was Bauer said that all umpires have to do when they check you is just say that the ball was sticky and suspend you. So an interesting point that he made, which I don't know if this is going to happen, is if an umpire doesn't like you, he can just say the ball was sticky, your hand is sticky, there's something on your hat, we're going to suspend you, and you can't appeal it. There's no proof. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's up to the umpire's discretion. So do I think they'll make an example out of somebody? Yes, but it is interesting to see like the process of checking guys and what they really determine to be quote unquote sticky. Because if you're playing a game at 1:00 in Miami with sunscreen on and you're going to go to the rosin bag, why would you not play with sunscreen, especially with the way that you're playing in a day game with the ultraviolet rays? Like you can't tell a player, especially a pitcher during a day game, you can't wear sunscreen. I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah, that is absolutely absurd. That was one thing I know a lot of people are talking about as well, is especially in that situation, if you're playing in the middle of a game where it's 90 degrees, sun is beating down, and you need to be wearing sunscreen, and what, are you just going to not use the rosin bag then?
And look, even if you're playing at night, like you go out to do your pregame warm-up, 30 minutes before the game, the sun is not setting right now. It's like 8:15. Like for the first few innings, if your game starts at 7:00, the sun's still going to be out. Like you can't fault any of these guys for wearing sunscreen. What if they have a history of melanoma in the family? Like Freddie Freeman always wears long sleeves because of that history. His mom unfortunately passed away due to skin cancer. But what if there's a history of melanoma? Or what if they just want to prevent it and be healthy? How are you going to tell a guy to not wear sunscreen? And my biggest thing with this whole thing is that sunscreen and rosin should still be allowed. As Will Middlebrooks, former major leaguer, who has pointed out this week, a Major League Baseball without anything on it feels like a cue ball in pool. It's so slippery. You need something to enhance that grip just so you have control on it. So there's no reason for Major League Baseball to go cold turkey on these guys in the season, draw a hard line, and ban everything. And we'll get into what Glass now has said, what Cole has said, but a lot of top pitchers are speaking out on banning sunscreen and rosin. Not the sticky stuff, but mainly sunscreen and rosin, which is a legitimate issue and complaint.
Yeah, speaking of the sticky stuff in particular, whether it be the spider tack or anything else, one of the big guys who came out and immediately criticized the MLB senior vice president of on-field operations, of course, Michael Hill, was Zach Gallen. Now, Gallen, of course, about to come back from the injury list. I'm sure the Diamondbacks are happy about that, given the record they just broke today, which we'll get into in a little bit. But Zach Gallen didn't hold back. And essentially what he was alluding to was the fact that when Michael Hill was still with the Marlins, that he was promoting the use of these foreign substances. And his quote was, he was in charge of an organization that was definitely at one point saying, hey, you're going to need these things to help you. You can read between the lines. And not exactly coming out and saying it, but definitely alluding to the fact that a little bit hypocritical.
All teams were teaching their pitchers how to use this stuff. It wasn't just the Marlins. It wasn't just the Diamondbacks. It wasn't just the Indians. It wasn't just the Rockies, you name it. Every single team was teaching their pitchers how to use this stuff. 100% of pitchers use sunscreen and rosin, from elite college programs all the way up to Major League Baseball, throughout the minor leagues. Everyone uses sunscreen and rosin to get a grip on the ball, because if you don't use anything, that ball is so slippery. And as we've seen this week, it's resulted in many guys having to grip the ball harder, and it's resulted in a key injury, specifically with Tampa Bay Rays ace Tyler Glasnow. He left his start on Monday in Chicago after 4 innings and 53 pitches, and he sounded off the next day, and rightfully so. He was not happy with the way Major League Baseball handled this whole situation, especially with drawing a hard line. Glasnow on the matter said, "I switched my fastball grip and my curveball grip. I had to put my fastball deeper into my hand and grip it way harder. Instead of holding my curveball at the tip of my fingers, I had to dig it deeper in my hand. I'm choking the crap out of all my pitches." And then he went on to say further, "In my mind, the whole thing about the foreign substances sounds dumb. That sounds like an excuse that a player would use to make sure he could use sticky stuff. Last week, I threw to the Nationals last week. I did well. I woke up the next day and I was sore in places I didn't even know I had muscles in." So that was Glasnow going from using the sticky stuff, using sunscreen and rosin. He admitted to using sunscreen and rosin because everybody does it. It's not an issue to going cold turkey. He woke up after a start against the Nationals, after the national start, because he went cold turkey, and he realized that it was a serious issue, and the pain persisted all week. And then he went on to say later, "Waking up after the start, I was like, this sucks. Something is weird here. That same feeling persisted all week long. I go into my start Monday, and that same feeling is there. It pops or whatever the hell happened to my elbow. I feel it. Something happened." Glasnow later on added, "Do it in the offseason. Give us a chance to adjust to it. But I just threw 80 innings, and then you tell me I can't use anything in the middle of the year. I have to change everything I've been doing the entire season. I'm telling you, I truly believe that's why I got hurt." And to Glasnow's point, I don't blame him at all. You can't just go cold turkey on these guys when they've been doing something not only this year, but for their entire lives, and something that's been widely accepted in the game for years upon years upon years upon generations. Like, this is not a new phenomenon. Players have been using sunscreen and rosin forever. It's not something that should have been banned, and MLB took way too hard of a line here, and it's costing Glasnow, it's costing the Rays, and it could come to cost many more players.
Final thought: seems like in a year that's already had an enormous amount of injuries across both leagues, this seems like something, yes or no, that's just going to add on to that total, especially in the case if people are doing things like Glasnow was.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that Glasnow got hurt. I feel terrible for him because he was in the midst of another, potential Cy Young campaign. He was going to put himself right in that conversation with the Rays, having one of the best records in baseball, again proving himself as a legitimate ace. But I hope Glasnow's injury makes MLB wake up after only one day of releasing the memo and say, "Hey, we got to readdress this offseason, or even in the middle of the season. We got to do something. We have to allow rosin and sunscreen, because this is going to cause further injuries, or do something to make the baseballs easier to grip, one or the other." But Glasnow having a partially torn UCL, Tommy John is still on the table. He's still going to try to avoid it for now. But if Glasnow ends up having to get Tommy John and miss a year and a half because of it, this is going to be a huge reason why an MLB could have a huge lawsuit on their hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that is definitely a topic for another day. A lot of stuff going on with if that could potentially occur. But it is a real possibility. We've seen that thrown around the past couple of days here since the announcement. Definitely could happen, whether it will not to be seen. Let's move on. We mentioned.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one more thing.
Glasnow also added about how there was we had a union meeting. 36 reps were there. And it was like, does anyone have a problem with sunscreen and rosin? No, not a single person said there was a problem with it. Hitters said, go ahead and use it. I believe this was in spring training. So now that it's somehow a problem now, I think that's the most absurd thing. There wasn't a problem with it, whether it was spring training last offseason, and now there's an issue to it. And Bauer added on that MLB swept this under the rug for 4 years after he first brought it up, and now they're doing something to it. The memo is fine long term. It will serve to the level of the playing field, but to implement it mid-season when for 3 months you promised it to players and teams that nothing about your chosen enforcement of the rules would change this year, and you actively encourage players to continue playing how they have in the past, that's a complete lie. So guys sounding off on it, guys upset about the mid-year change, and hopefully Major League Baseball can do something about it, or else this could get really ugly.
It just seemed like a poor time to just implement it out of nowhere, like you said, cold turkey.
Yeah,
I don't know why you wouldn't just either do it at the beginning of the year, especially if you have a union meeting where everyone agrees that it's fine. Like, if you're gonna have a problem, say it there. Or like Glasnow was saying, do it in the off season. Let them get months and months to adjust to it and get accustomed to it, and hopefully prevent some of these injuries that we're hopefully not going to see too many more of, but have already seen.
Yeah, I understand the spider tack complaints from hitters, but sunscreen and rosin went way too far, and this is a huge issue.
Absolutely. We mentioned the Diamondbacks earlier in the episode. Why don't we just quickly mention what happened to them today? They broke a A record today that I don't know when it was first set, but
They lost 10-3 on the road to the San
yes,
Francisco Giants. They've now lost 23 consecutive road games, a new major league record. There's not much to talk about the Diamondbacks this year. Ketel Marte is lighting it up. Madison Bumgarner's fake no-hitter was their last road win. That was in April.
wow, that is true. There is a 7 inning no hitter. The last time that the Diamondbacks were on one on the road, and I got to ask, we've talked about this probably 3 times at this point on this show. But Ketel Marte, he's got a lot of control left. I think 2 to 3 years. Do you trade him?
Ketel Marte has 3 years of control left after this year, so it would be 3.5 if you move him at the deadline. I don't know why you wouldn't trade him if you're Arizona. You're not going to compete anytime soon. There's nothing good about your team. You have Ketel Marte, you have Eduardo Escobar, you have Madison Bumgarner. Okay, I'll throw in David Peralta too. You have
Zach Gallen.
Sure, but I'm talking about like guys that are going to be there for the long haul. Gallen, I think, will be there for the long haul.
Okay.
Control he has, but I'm talking about like in the present moment. Gallen's in the present moment. You have a few trade pieces. Why wouldn't you capitalize on just resetting this whole thing, trading Ketel Marte, getting a boatload back? Because whoever it is, Boston, New York, Chicago, whoever ends up trading for Ketel Marte, they're going to be getting a really good player who can play premium defense at multiple positions, both in the infield and the outfield. But why would you not capitalize and just reset this rebuild? You're not going anywhere, especially in that division. There have been rumors that Ken Rosenthal reported yesterday in The Athletic that Arizona might want to hold on to Ketel Marte until the offseason or maybe even longer. But why? The control is great. I get that. But the Diamondbacks are not anywhere close to competing. So for the Dbacks that just want to not get as much back in return, you can accelerate the rebuild if you get a couple premium prospects back for an elite player in Ketel Marte.
I'll say, coming off the IL, he has just been lighting it up. And like you said, Boston, New York, wherever it may be, there's a lot of teams that I believe would pay a premium to get a guy like him, especially given the fact that you said he has 3.5 years of control.
Yeah, it's not a rental, and he'll be an elite piece at the top of the order for the next 3 years. For those of you who don't know, Marte on the season in 118 at bats, he's hitting 347 with 4 home runs and 16 RBIs to go along with a 916 OPS. And this is no fluke, obviously. In 2019, he was the starting second baseman for the National League All-Star team. He finished 4th in MVP voting with 32 bombs, 92 RBIs, and a 981 OPS with a 329 average. So this is no fluke for Marte. We know what kind of player he is. He's just 27 years old. So you're going to be getting him through his age 30 season. You're going to be getting Ketel Marte's prime. So this is it. Whatever prospects you give up, it's absolutely worth it. It's not like it's something where you're giving up these prospects and you're taking a chance on a guy. It's going to be a win-win for both sides. The Diamondbacks will get 2 elite prospects back, and whoever gets Ketel Marte will be getting one of the elite players in Major League Baseball in his prime for another 3.5 years.
Anyone else on the Diamondbacks you see 100% leaving at the deadline?
See, I don't see Marte being 100% that. I would trade him,
yeah,
but
that's what I'm saying.
I would say Escobar and Peralta.
Okay.
Those two for sure. Escobar and Peralta, I think they're too soon into the Mad Bum deal to want to trade him. I think they would wait another year, just like they kind of waited 3 years into the Greinke deal. I think they would wait 3 years into Mad Bum's deal to trade him. So I think Peralta and Escobar, maybe if a team blows them away for Bumgarner, that they make the trade. But right now definitely, yes, I would just say Peralta and Escobar.
It makes you wonder what exactly is the strategy going on here. This is the second time, of course, with Bumgarner. You have a guy that you signed to a multi-year deal, a pitcher that it looks like is just going to either be traded or just kind of fizzle out. I don't really know what's going on there.
Yeah, I'm
especially
not sure.
When they signed him, they didn't look like they were going to compete.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if 2020, we played out a full season, I think that would have been really interesting for the Diamondbacks just because they signed Bumgarner, they traded for Starling Marte. They were close in 19 they finished with 85 wins in 19 with 0 expectations. So I think the hope was in a normal 2020, you have Mad Bum, you have Starling Marte to go along with Ketel Marte, Escobar, Peralta, all those guys coming back. They could have been sneaky contenders in 2020 in a full season. But now I don't think there's any plan. And I feel really bad for Torey Lovello because he's a great manager. And if he ends up getting fired after this year, they're 30 games under 500. He's done a lot in Arizona. He's had a lot of success there. He was a really good bench coach with the Red Sox. He'll definitely find himself back on his feet real soon and probably in a managerial spot, in the next couple of years because he was very close to becoming the Red Sox manager before they fired John Farrell. And I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be a major league manager at some point soon. He has all the intangibles. His players love him. He's coached good teams. He's had success in Arizona. This is not his fault. He just has a really bad team on his hands.
Absolutely agree. Going from a very not so hot team in the Diamondbacks to an unbelievably hot player. How could we have a show this week without talking about Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the first baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays? Having an absolutely amazing season, as we've talked about many times on this show, put another fantastic performance on in Boston this weekend, which, James, I'm sure you can attest to. And overall, he's just having an unbelievable season. There's no other words to say it. He's slashing 343, 447 on base with a 682 slugging. He's got 22 home runs, which leads the league. He's got 81 hits, which leads the league. He's got 56 RBI that leads the league. I mean, do you see anyone else challenging him for the MVP if he keeps this up? Because this is just unbelievable.
Right now, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is the best player in baseball. And you and I both said on opening day that he would have a 2015 Bryce Harper type season, and he's just exceeding those expectations.
Yes,
and you can go back and find the film. We both said it here the first week of the season that he was going to have this type of season. I don't think any of us expected it to be like this otherworldly. He is the best player in baseball right now. I mean, going to your question about challenging for the AL MVP, I think the only other guy really is Ohtani because of, his capability to be a two-way player and doing it at an elite level. Obviously, right now, I would for sure give it to Vladdy. But you talk about challengers, Ohtani would be right up there. But this is all about Vladdy Jr. I mean, what an unbelievable season. He leads all of Major League Baseball with a 4.2 WAR. As Andrew said, he's hitting 343 with a 682 slug and a 447 OBP. He's got a 201 WRC plus. That's 101 points above the league average, which is just otherworldly. He's got an 1129 OPS against the Red Sox this weekend. He had an OPS over 2,000 in the series. He hit 4 home runs, including the game tying home run on Monday in the 9th inning off Matt Barnes. He's the hottest of hot right now. Like he's been hot all year, but like this is a guy who is at his hottest peak right now in terms of what he's doing at the plate. He's putting it all together. He's getting on base at an insane clip. I mean, 447, you talk about otherworldly. I mean, you don't see guys with that high on base anymore. I don't think we've had a guy really besides Trout in the last, 10 years who's consistently gotten on base at a clip above 430. And, this is the vision of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. being, and if he can continue this, look out, because what he's doing right now is just, it's beyond special. I mean, he's hitting the ball for power, he's hitting for contact. Every time he comes up, it's like you don't want to pitch to him. Like he is so scary. He's so locked in at the plate. He's so fun to watch. Like the other night when he hit the game tying home run against the Red Sox, I couldn't even be mad. I was like, this is Vladdy. This is the best hitter in the game, at the peak of his hottest stretch. Like it's mesmerizing watching him. Like he's unbelievable. He literally is so awesome to watch hit.
See, I was going to say, it seemed like every other second I was scrolling through my feed over the weekend. It was just another Vladimir Guerrero Jr. home run over the Green Monster. I mean, it was one after another, it seemed like. And yeah, I think you said it best. It's otherworldly. We haven't seen a guy get this kind of ridiculous on-base percentage other than Mike Trout. I mean, just getting over 400 is something
Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is hitting 420 in the month of June. In 59 plate appearances, he's hitting 420 in June with 6 home runs, 14 RBIs, 10 runs scored, 9 walks. He's probably already locked up player of the month, and we're halfway through the month of June.
And the biggest thing to me is what I said earlier is not only is it just the insane power numbers and on base, he's leading the league in hits too. No, he's doing it all. He really is doing it all.
Yeah, he don't I know it's June and a lot of things can happen, but do not be surprised if he is in contention for the Triple Crown until the very end of the season or if he captures it. I mean, he's on that kind of level right now where he's doing everything right. It's not like he's striking out a lot or hitting for a low average. He's a complete 5-tool hitter and the best hitter that's come up through the minors since Mike Trout.
A 2015 Bryce Harper season is
and then some,
what we said.
And then some.
And then some. I was just about to say, that's what we said on opening day. We might have underestimated it.
Yeah, I mean, he's not selling anyone short. And he deserves the MVP if he keeps going at this rate, and he could definitely lock up the Triple Crown. It's unbelievable. He's just unbelievably special. I mean, and he doesn't have any weaknesses at the plate. Throw him a breaking ball, he'll hit it. Throw him a fastball, he'll hit it. And he has plate discipline, unlike his dad.
Very true indeed. Much better plate discipline than his father, Vlad Sr. And you talk about Triple Crown there. He is only trailing Michael Brantley right now by 0.01, and the next guy under that is Xander Bogaerts. If that keeps up, legitimately, yes, we could see a Triple Crown. I agree.
Yeah, and just going to the Blue Jays real quick. I mean, offensively, they're about to get George Springer back, but they are the second best offensive team in baseball right now, behind the Houston Astros. I mean, you look at what Bo Bichette has done. You look at what Marcus Semien has done, really on a prove it 1 year, $18 million deal, coming off a rough 2020 after a really good season in 2019. He had a rough 2020. Ken Rosenthal with a great piece in The Athletic today about Semien's rough 2020 and how he's bounced back in 2021. But as a team, Toronto is hitting 261. They have a 773 OPS. They've hit 103 home runs. They've scored 329 runs, and they have 100 doubles. I mean, look, if you have 100 doubles and 100 home runs at this point in the season with over 300 runs scored on average, that's elite. That's elite of the elite. And them, Houston, and Boston boast the top three offenses in baseball, all in the American League. And kind of segueing into what we were going to into next, the cream of the crop this year is really in the American League. When you look at a lot of the teams that have risen to the top this year, obviously in the National League, you have the Dodgers and the Giants, but really the American League is competitive from top to bottom. You have the Oakland Athletics, the Houston Astros battling it out in the AL West. You have the Rays and the Red Sox battling it out in the AL East, with the Blue Jays and Yankees both hanging around in a really tough division. And then you have the Chicago White Sox, who have the best record in Major League Baseball and have really done it without two of their big stars, Eloy Jimenez and Luis Robert, and Nick Madrigal just going on the DL. So three big blows for the White Sox, and they're still hanging in there with the best record in baseball. Just they keep doing what they're doing. And I think looking ahead to the postseason, the stretch run in the American League for the postseason races, it's going to be incredibly exciting to see these teams battle it out, both for playoff spots and then in the postseason, whatever matchups we get.
Yeah, they've been able to really keep it together despite the amount of injuries that have piled up there. Now, I know they were a lot of people's favorites to not only win that division, but potentially win the AL,
Yeah,
if not the Yankees
they
at the
were
beginning
my
of the season.
they were my World Series pick at the beginning of the year, and to see what they've done with all these injuries, it's truly incredible because they pretty much lose one guy a month. They lost Eloy in April, they lost Robert in May, and now they've lost Madrigal end of May, early June. So hopefully they can just keep it going. But obviously they're going to want to trade for someone at some point.
Then there's a lot of potential out there. I mean, you talk about another place that Ketel Marte could easily fit in.
Absolutely.
I mean, especially like you said, the fact that he can play second short or anywhere in the outfield, I'm sure they could find a place for him. And then think about it. You start getting these guys back who are injured, the fact that they've been winning without them, that's going to be a really good team.
Oh, yeah. Look, they're already a really good team, but getting those guys back, getting Kopech back, getting Giolito back on track. He's had a good season, but I don't think the season as good of a season as a lot of people projected him to have. If they get him back on track, Lance Lynn anchoring the top of their rotation, they're a scary team because they are far and away the best team in that division. There's no doubt. They are far away the best team in the AL Central. Obviously, you have Cleveland hanging around. Kansas City was hanging around a little bit before a tough stretch, but they are the best team in that AL Central. So, if they can lock things up early and they can start resting guys, in September and get guys healthy, if Eloy Jimenez somehow comes back, they're going to be scary.
They already are scary. They're going to be even more
that's
scary.
my point. They're going to be even more they're adding Eloy to the mix. I mean, how much better can you get?
I don't think I want to know. I especially don't want to know if I'm playing them in the postseason. But that's going to be. I got to say, at this point, of course, we're approaching the halfway point of the season. All-Star game coming up within a month, but there's a lot of talent in the AL. But it seems like they might be the team to be right now.
Yeah, they're 8-2 in their last 10. They just took 2 or 3 from the Red Hot Rays, who are 24-7. The Rays are 24-7 since May 12th when they were 19-19. So they just hardly ever lose. But the White Sox are now 43-25, half game above the Rays for the best record in baseball. The Rays are 43-26, Boston 42-27, Oakland 43-27, and Houston 39-28. So you talk about the cream of the crop in Major League Baseball. A lot of those teams reside in the AL. Only 2 teams over 40 wins in the National League. But you already have 4 of those teams in the American League. So just looking at the stretch run, I think you're going to have a lot of exciting races in the American League as we really get down to it and, get down to the trade deadline, see what pieces teams need, who's performing well, and what teams are going to sell going forward.
Absolutely. Approaching the end of our show here, something that I wanted to do before we ended here. We just, as you may know, approached the 60-game mark of the season. Of course, last year, a 60-game shortened season in 2020. And since we're at that mark here, I think it's as good a point as ever. I want to ask you, James, and I'll give my own here. why don't you go ahead and give me your division winners and wild card people and see if they've changed since opening day?
Like, who do I think they'll be at the end of the season? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, we're at the end of what would have been a 2020 season, and we know how they lie right now, and we've seen these teams over 60 games. Why don't we
Yeah.
revise our picks a little bit?
Yeah. So for the AL East, I'm going to go with the Red Sox. I think call it bias if you want, but I had them as a wild card in the beginning of the year. I think the Glasnow injury really puts a damper in Tampa Bay spirits. If they don't have that ace every 5 days to go out there and get you 7 innings, it's going to be hard to kind of bullpen it per se, every single day. They're only one game back at Tampa right now. They're playing really well. And if Tampa can somehow start losing, then I think Boston will overtake them for the division. So I think the Red Sox will win the AL East. I think the White Sox will win the AL Central. I think Houston will win the AL West. I think that offense has too much firepower. I know Bregman just went on the IL today, but you look at what Michael Brantley has done, albeit he's been hurt. You look at what Yordan Alvarez has done, Carlos Correa, Jose Altuve. I think that offense just has too much firepower, and I think the two wild cards in the American League will be Tampa Bay and Oakland. So I think those 5 teams right there, you're really looking at the 5 playoff teams just in any sort of order, but those 5 teams will be the playoff teams in the American League.
All right. I pretty much agree with all those points there. I actually do have the Rays winning the AL East. I do think the loss of Glasnow, if there's going to be a reason that they don't win the division, it's going to be that. That one hurts big time. But they've had a lot of other guys step up. Rich Hill's been really good for them. And you always know how they like doing the opener. So we'll see if they can hold it out. I do think they will. I'm a big fan of the Rays and what they
somehow
do.
without like one star, they have a plus 83 run differential. Like,
and that's what's mind blowing to me.
No, it really is mind blowing because you never see them have those like 16-3 wins or whatever. They're always like, it's always a 2-1 game, 4-3, 5-2, or if it's a high scoring game, it's 8-6. It's not like they're consistently beating teams 9-3, 10-1, 11-6, all that sort of stuff. But what they've done this year is remarkable. They've been incredibly hot, and I think the race between them and the Red Sox is going to come down to the final weekend of the season.
I think the more interesting thing to quickly talk about is the fact that both of us are sitting here and not even mentioning the Yankees for a potential postseason spot.
Well, look, I mean, at the beginning of the season when they were 5-11, I said they're going to turn it around. They're going to get better, but how much better are they going to get? They're not going to be the behemoth of the American League like most people thought they would be, and they haven't been. They're 3 games above 500 at 35-32. They're 7 games back of the Rays, 6 games back of the Red Sox in the division, and offensively, they have struggled to hit the baseball all year. Besides Aaron Judge, they have not had a consistent hitter all season long. Besides Cole, nobody in the rotation has been consistent. It's just been an up and down average baseball team. I think the reason why they get so much attention, they still have great odds to win the World Series, whatever, is because they're the New York Yankees. If they were any other team, they wouldn't have that type of pedigree.
100% agree with you. And yeah, I don't have them in a postseason spot as well. Just quickly finish up there. I have the Rays taking the East, White Sox in the Central, Athletics in the West, exactly as it is right now. After 66 games, I want to say, with most teams have played. And my wild card game is the Red Sox and Astros.
And then in the National League, I have the Mets as it stands right now. In the NL East, I have the Dodgers eventually coming out on top in the NL West. I think that's going to be a great race between them, the Giants, and the Padres. But I think ultimately the Dodgers' depth will be rewarded, and I think they're the most talented team. And in the NL Central, I have the Chicago Cubs. They've come on since May 1st and have been absolutely incredible. They were 19-9 in May. They've continued it in June. Chris Bryant is having an MVP-type season. Jock Peterson has really turned it on. Javi Baez, Anthony Rizzo. And it's a tight division race right now between them, Milwaukee, Cincinnati, and St. Louis. But I think Chicago ultimately holds on and wins that division. With the way they've been playing, I think they're motivated this year to keep that core intact beyond this year and to make one more run at it with that current core. And the 2 wild cards are 2 teams from the National League West, the San Francisco Giants and the San Diego Padres. Both those teams are just too talented to not make the playoffs this year, especially the Padres. I know they've fallen back a little bit in the division race. They're 6.5 back in third place. But, with the season Tatis is having, they're too talented to not make it, especially with Darvish carrying the pitching rotation. But Tatis will carry them at least to the wild card game.
Great picks indeed. Pretty similar as well there. I don't have the Cubs in the Central. I'll start there. I still believe in the Brewers. I still believe when everyone's healthy that is the best team in the Central and the one to beat. The West, I do have the Dodgers, and I have to agree with you there. The depth is what's going to bring them out on top. Padres, of course, not looking as good as of late, but I believe they're 2-8 in their last 10, which is not very good. But you know what? I think it's a very talented team, and I do think the Dodgers and Padres are the top 2 teams. I don't like the Giants keeping this up. And you know what? You can call me crazy because it's going to be the middle of June here. It already is the middle of June, and they're still doing it. They're 44 and 25, almost 20 games over 500. But I don't know, something about the team doesn't scream postseason run to me. And if I got to be honest, I don't think they're making the playoffs. I'm going to talk about the NL East real quick here.
Can we talk about one thing with the Giants after?
Yeah, why don't we do that right now? Actually, go ahead.
I just want to bring up Kevin Gausman. I think when you talk about best pitchers in the National League, I don't think many people are paying attention to what Kevin Gausman is doing. I think you talk about DeGrom, you talk about Woodruff, you talk about Corbin Burns, talk about Darvish. Kevin Gausman is really flying under the radar and having an incredible season. He's 7-1 with a 1.43 ERA, and if it wasn't for DeGrom, Kevin Gausman would probably win the National League Cy Young.
I would agree 100%. That is looking like a fantastic signing right now.
Yeah, I just think he's flying under the radar. And when everyone talks about the Giants, they talk about all the veterans, picking it up offensively. Buster Posey having a career resurgence. Brandon Belt, Brandon Crawford, Longoria, who's now on the IL, but was really having a solid season before he went on the IL. I just think Gausman is not getting enough love and attention. He's flying under the radar, and he's been one of the best pitchers in baseball all season long for the best team in the National League all season long.
Buster Posey went from a guy that I think a lot of people thought was washed up and done, potentially making the Hall of Fame, to a guy who, correct me if I'm wrong, I think is going to start the All-Star game this year, a catcher for the National League.
He should. If he doesn't, there's something wrong with the voting system. He should 100% start the All-Star game for the National League. I mean, Buster Posey is putting up 2012 MVP type numbers, and he's reminding people that he is the best catcher of this generation and that he should be arguably a first ballot Hall of Famer when his career is done. He's hitting .337 with 26 RBIs, 12 home runs, a .996 OPS, and he has a 2.1 WAR.
He's been unbelievable for them. A big reason why they are, like you said, the best team in the National League record-wise right now. I still don't agree with that. I don't think it's going to hold on, but we'll see. They very well could prove me wrong. They've done it before. The Giants seem to have a little bit of a mystical way to them sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving to the NL East, and we talked about this before the show here. I do think it's going to be one of the Mets or the Phillies who win this division. I've watched all of these teams all season long. There's problems with each and every one of them. So many problems. And I said this before the season. The Braves, I didn't like them this year. Something was not right, and they're showing that. They're not playing like the Braves that we know. And this is not a team that I think is making the playoffs this year or even has a chance to. They've looked absolutely miserable. The Nationals, they're tied with the Braves right now, but they've looked even worse. Forget about the Marlins. It's going to be the Mets or Phillies. Here's what it comes down to. If you pressed me for an answer, I would say that the Mets are going to win this division. The problem is that I have with that statement is the Mets still have 5 games to make up. Those 5 games at the beginning of the season that were, I believe they were delayed against the Nationals, and I don't remember the other team.
Colorado,
that's what it was. They got to make them up, and yeah, they're in first right now, and they're up 5 games, but the Phillies are right behind them. It's only a 2-win difference there because they've played 5 more games than the Mets. I mean, right there, you make up those 5 games and you lose them, and it's a tie at the top of the division. So press me for an answer. I'm going to say the Mets, but I legitimately believe one of those 2 teams will win the division. And I think I've said this on here before. I believe the team that does it is just barely going to be over 500.
Yeah, it makes sense, especially with the way that division has played this year. Quickly, a couple things before we wrap up. I'll be real quick on this. Like one guy who I wanted to talk about, he just went on the IL, but I think he's had an under-the-radar season for a team who got off to a hot start but hasn't really lived up to that, and that's the Kansas City Royals, is Andrew Benintendi. He came over from the Red Sox in a 5-player trade. He obviously didn't live up to his full expectations in Boston. I still think the Red Sox gave up on him way too early. They sold way too low. I don't think it was the right move to trade him for Franchy Cordero and whoever else they got back. I don't even care to know who they got back right now with the other 4 players. It was something that they needed to give Benintendi another shot at it, and he is definitely proving why he was regarded as the number 1 prospect in baseball at one point. Overall this season, he is hitting .283 with 8 homers, only a .769 OPS, and a .340 on base percentage. While those numbers might not pop right off the page, he had a slow start in April, but has really hit the cover off the ball since May 1st. From May 1st to June 3rd, Andrew Benintendi hit .353 with the 2nd highest average in Major League Baseball. And he went on the IL in the beginning of June, so obviously, in June he was hitting .240, in the few games before he went on the IL. But for a month stretch, he hit .350, and he brought his OPS up. He brought his average up. He was right up there with the hits leaders until he went on the IL. He's proving to everyone that he can still play, and I think if he didn't get hurt, he was making a push to make the All-Star team.
I mean, look, you got teams like the Marlins and the Pirates where there's absolutely nothing to actually, not gonna say look forward to, but to watch this year. Hey, the Royals are a fun team to watch, and he's a big reason why, I'd
Yeah,
say.
Salvador Perez, Whit Merrifield, Andrew Benintendi, there are guys on the Royals roster that you want to watch. And I think if the Royals were open to it, they could definitely get a decent amount back for Benintendi. I don't think they're going to trade him. I think he is part of their future, but Benintendi is having a solid season. And if he were to go to a contender for whatever reason, he would be a big piece for that contender because he can hit at the top of the order. He'll play solid defense in the outfield, and you can trust him in big situations, as we saw in the 2018 playoffs with the Red Sox.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And with that, we're about approaching the time here that we wanted to hit for tonight's show. So I think that's going to wrap it up, unless, James, you got anything else you want to quickly say before we close out?
Just shout out to Alex Verdugo and Christian Arroyo, two big clutch home runs for the Red Sox to beat the Braves last two nights, both by the final score of 10-8. Alex Verdugo should be an all-star. That's all I'm going to say. He's had a great year, and Christian Arroyo has hit his 4 home runs on the season in the last 2 weeks. They've all been game tying or go ahead home runs, and Christian Arroyo kind of flies under the radar, but he's been great for the Red Sox this year. Verdugo, real quick, is hitting 289 with 9 homers and 810 OPS, and if Xander Bogaerts might be the captain of the Red Sox, Alex Verdugo is the vocal leader and the face of the Red Sox. He plays with so much energy and passion, and he was made to play in Boston.
Definitely makes the Mookie Betts trade a little easier to swallow, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, still tough, trading a top 3 player in Major League Baseball, Mookie Betts, but Alex Verdugo is putting up legit numbers, and he's a legit player. He's not just a throw-in. He's not just the guy they got from Mookie Betts. I hate how whenever they bring up one of those guys, especially Verdugo, it's always a comparison, but Alex Verdugo is a legit player, and he's showing the Red Sox, how he can fill in for Betts and how he can really produce and make an impact on a nightly basis.
Well, hey, if you don't mind, let me follow suit there and give a shout out to a guy who was in the news a lot this week, Mr. Luke Williams. What
there
a
we
story.
Go, yeah.
Guy was on the Team USA qualifier earlier, I believe it was last week at this point, and got the call up from the Phillies, forfeited his chance to play in the Olympics to go up and play for the Phillies. And in his first ever career start, go ahead and hits a walk-off 2-run home run to beat the Braves in a huge game. And James, that's not all he's done since then. The guy's hitting 474 in his first week and a half of play. He's only struck out 3 times. He's looked fantastic up there, and it's just one of those really good feel-good stories, especially with a guy like him who's been wanting to make the majors for as long as he has. Hadn't really had that opportunity the past 3 years. Was going to go for the Olympics instead. And if you saw his interview after his home run last week, you know how emotional, how much this meant to him.
Yeah, that was a great moment, and that's what makes baseball so great. I mean, that's why we love baseball, for stories like that. And obviously, Luke Williams is not going to hit over 400 the whole season, but you hope he can stay hot and, provide for the Phillies and see what he can do, maybe make a name for himself and be a starter for the rest of the year, because guys like that, that's what makes or breaks a season sometimes. You have those high energy guys or those high impact guys who they'll come up for a month or they'll have even a good extended stretch, and you never know what it can turn into. It could turn into him being a starter next year, or it could turn into him, finding a spot somewhere else if he were to end up on another team. But he'll always have that moment, and, we'll see what it turns into for the Phillies for the rest of the season.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That is why we love baseball, moments like that. And with that said, I think that's going to close out this edition of Nation's Pastime in the Nation's Capital. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Once again, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at @PastimeCap. And if you want to send a question, whether it be a voicemail or in text form, we will read it on here if that's the case. You can email us, and that email address would be natpastimecapital. I believe, actually, instead of natpastimecapital, it is natpastimecapital@gmail.com. Or easier way, if contact with any of the hosts, shoot us the question there, or Twitter DMs as well at natpastimecap. There's many of ways to do it, and it lets you get involved in the show. So go ahead and give it a shot for next week's show. And with that said, that's going to do it for this edition of Nation's Pastime in the Nation's Capital. I've been your host, Andrew Snaith, here with my co-host, James Higgins, and have a fantastic rest of your night.